topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good morning, Florida. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the finest experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. This is the last Monday of April. I cannot believe April is almost gone. What has happened to this year? But because this is the last Monday in April, that means Deb Baker, attorney Deb Baker, our great estate planning attorney, my friend. She's been with us for several years now. And I love doing this show because, and this is a compliment, it goes by so fast. Good morning, attorney Baker.
Hey, Steve. I'm glad we've established our names now. Okay.
Yes, 2 years we had over the weekend.
It's okay.
Come here and go by. She goes by Deb, and I told her I'd go by Steve-O and not Steven. So nice to meet you, Deb.
Good to go, Steve-O. Good to go. I see the cat came. Good morning.
How's everything in Tampa?
Good. Hot, but it's probably hot where you are as well. So
it is. I got to tell you, I've been doing Ask the Experts for 15 years, and I'm still blown away by the word estate planning. People still misconstrue this, that if you go to an estate planning attorney, you have to have millions of dollars. And what we try to do on the show is really educate you what really the true meaning of estate planning is. But first, Deb, tell us about your firm and kind of your story, because you've got such a unique story.
Oh, gosh. So the story, well, let's see, we shouldn't date the program, but in the world of reality, May 16th, which is 2 weeks from this Friday,
yes,
will be the 10th anniversary of my law school graduation, which is pretty astounding.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty astounding. And
congratulations.
So law school was not a first career, probably not. Well, might be legitimately called a second career, and came about as a walk of faith, which I've said before. So, and I loved law school. I hated to graduate. I really hated to graduate. I just didn't have the money to keep going.
But you were a life coach before.
Yeah, I've been a life coach my whole life. So, but it was a time, God said, take a new direction and enter a new dimension, so to speak. So law school was just a walk into something that I couldn't have imagined and has really been pretty glorious. The practice is estate planning, wills, trusts, probate, because people don't know what it is. To your point, Steve, people think, I probably used to think the same thing. You had to have millions of dollars, and it's not an uncommon thought to think you have nothing. The challenge is it's wrong. So I wrote an article called "Things I Wish People Knew About Estate Planning," and I wish they knew that if you have a bank account and you're over 18 years old, you really have to have something in place. And oftentimes something in place doesn't even necessarily need an attorney for any in-depth kind of thing. But estate planning, because it's a great way to be of service. I never want to go into court. I've only had 2 hearings to just clarify things, and they, as bold as people think I am, they terrified me because how this image of judges, black robes and very sour and, somber. And both of them were, both judges were in street clothes and just wanted to be there to help. So estate planning is for anybody over the age of 18 who has any kind of asset, a bank account, a checking account, a savings account. And they need to do something with it so that something happens to them, it goes to whomever they want to have it go to. And a lot of it does not require an attorney. It's done talking to bank officers or insurance agents or whatever. So that's kind of the story. And it's been pretty glorious.
And Deb, people think it's really expensive to have to go when it comes to estate planning, but everybody's case is different. So that is a misnomer right there.
I think so. I don't know when the last time you and Sophia bought an item that you hadn't purchased before and you were appalled at the price until maybe you did some comparison shopping, like whatever. It could be your headsets. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, right? So people think it's too expensive because they hear that from friends who aren't in the same situation. So even if they say that, that's not true. And they don't have a frame of reference. There are legal plans out there that employers offer to their employees that are legal memberships that are nominal or cost nothing, which will do basic planning, wills and powers of attorney and that kind of thing. But no 2 plans are the same, and you need to have a frame of reference. My fees are not necessarily the least expensive, but they're far from the most expensive to the best of my knowledge. And they're flat fees. Occasionally there are estate planners who charge by the hour. I don't charge by the hour. So there are times that if I charge by the hour, you have vastly underpaid me. And there are probably if I charge by the hour, you vastly overpaid me. But the flat fee just allows somebody to know and not have to think about it. One of the things I brought from my coaching is I didn't want anybody to hesitate to call me if they had a question or a concern. And if I charged by the hour, then I would either be giving away time, which would bother me after a while, or you would feel like you wouldn't call me because you didn't want to be billed. So flat fees, it's not too expensive. It really does. I love saying this. One of the first things I learned in law school was it's a very legitimate answer to tell somebody it all depends. Depends what you have. So
that is so important what you said. I know my Sophia has been in a long and tangled lawsuit for years, and she actually had a question about the bill, and she has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. She actually had a question about the bill. She got a bill for calling and asking for a question about that bill. Does that surprise you?
It appalls me. It doesn't surprise me. It's more that, and I've had other people tell me that. In fact, the woman who was my first mentor, so to speak, talked about she did flat billing because she had the same situation. She's an attorney, and she called an attorney to ask something about something, and he sent her. I'm assuming it was he. That's not really fair, but the attorney sent her a bill, and she questioned it. So for me, it would be like Sophia calls back and says, "It's not necessary. You didn't even tell me you're going to charge me for questioning your bill. I mean, help me out here. I have a question about your bill, and you're billing me for the question." So that appalls me. And in fairness to the law firm, if the culture is, or the practice is you bill for the time, then you would reasonably assume that somebody who called you would know that they were going to be billed. Doesn't make them right for not saying, by the way, if we have this conversation, I'm going to have to bill you.
That's a great idea. Right.
Right? And like all of us, Steve, you've got stuff in your industry that you become oblivious to because it's so obvious to you, whether it's jargon or best practices or whatever. And then when somebody questions them, you're thinking, well, why would they question that? And then if you think a little longer, you go, well, why would they know? How would they know that? Which, to the 2 points about what's an estate and is it too expensive? How would somebody know what too expensive is until
Right.
they called around and said, and when people call and say, what is your fee? I said, are you calling a lot of people? And they say, well, we're calling several. I said, okay, so here's my fee. Call me back or not. But understand that whatever the fee isn't going to necessarily supplant a relationship that you have with somebody you trust. So, I wouldn't suggest that somebody pay somebody double or triple because you like them. But, if somebody charges you X and somebody charges you X plus 20%, and you really like the one with the 20%, you might consider going with that. Or in the world of bold, say, listen, Joe quoted me X, you quoted me X plus 20%. Can you do it for X or can you do it for something in the middle? The worst possible outcome is they say no, or they say no. But people don't ask questions.
When we first started doing the show, I was so impressed. We're talking about fees, and you said, my job is to keep my client out of probate. Now, for all of you who do not know, probate can become very expensive. Here
Very
you have
expensive.
an attorney. This is how you make your living. You're an attorney. Um, Saying, I want to keep my clients out of probate. That
Well,
is, I was so impressed when you said that.
well, thank you. I think the estate planning attorneys I know are all, I say, committed to keeping their clients out of probate. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't. Um, Oftentimes, if we don't, it's more than likely that the client. Okay, so you and Sophia have your whole thing set up, and you've got a trust or whatever. You've got whatever it is that your house is going to go to. If you live in a condo, your condo, and then you buy another piece of property, and you don't buy it in the name of the trust, and you forget to somehow make it a beneficiary designated. Then it's the unfortunate situation of having probate. I would say estate planning attorneys mostly are flat fee and mostly are committed to keeping their clients out of probate, because probate, if you think estate planning is expensive, just price of probate. It's going to be 2 or 3 times as much. It's going to take however long it's going to take, and your family could wind up not talking to each other at the end of it. And that's a big price to pay, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of superstitions out there about estate planning.
Uh-huh.
One of them is, I'll die as soon as I do it.
Yeah.
Touch
I know.
on that.
Well, somebody said to me recently, well, it could happen. And well, yeah, it could. We have no promises. The thing is that if you don't do it because you think that's going to happen, it's pretty darn selfish, because you've left your family in a world of hurt. And I've said this here more than once. If you hate your family, don't plan. Let them suffer, because they will. And they'll dislike you even more than they disliked you when you were alive, for not caring enough about them. And I had a client who died 10 hours after we signed his documents. And it was totally unexpected. It wasn't like we didn't sign them because it was imminent. We signed them because it was time. And he died 10 hours later. And it was really good. It was really, really good, because had he not had them, and had he and his wife not taken some steps they'd taken before we signed them, she would have been in a mess. She would have been in a mess. They were married for a long time. They got divorced because she was concerned that if his health wasn't the best, if he needed like government benefits, that she would lose everything. And she didn't talk to anybody about it. She listened to people who told her she'd lose everything. So they got divorced. And when I started working with them, they told me the story. I said, well, you won't. That's not true. And right now, you don't even own, the two of you don't own your house together. You own 50% and he owns 50%. She said, no, we don't. I said, well, yes, you did. Because as soon as you got divorced, your ownership interests changed. So I convinced them to get remarried. And she said, well, we're going to get remarried. And I think he needs to get me a diamond. I said, no, you need to get him a diamond because the divorce was your idea. But had they not remarried, she would have been in probate because his family would have owned half the house and she would have owned half the house. And she didn't know that because she listened to her friends. Say, if Joe needs Medicaid, you're going to wind up losing everything. She didn't ask an attorney. She listened to her friends. You really want to not listen to your friends. You want to get an attorney, get some referrals, talk to some people, find out what really is the case and get rid of the superstitions. But that was really a tragic thing. And she called me that morning. I had no idea how she had the presence of mind to call me and tell me that he passed. But yeah, it happens.
Okay, I'm getting ready to blow your mind right now.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you a short story. I think people need to hear it. People down here in South Florida know about it. I had an estate planning attorney who did my show in South Florida for 5 years. Most wonderful man you've ever want to meet. He's probably in his early 50s. But remember, he's an estate planning attorney. His son decided one day to end his dad's life. You probably heard the story. He was my expert on the show. And that was the furthest thing he expected is for his son to murder him.
Right.
And do you know, because of his age, there was things that he did not do in this as an estate planning attorney.
Yeah.
Because of his age, thinking, well, this will never happen.
Yeah.
But you can't say that.
No.
Because you never know.
No, you never know. You never know. Yeah, you never know.
So tell people, because I've just gotten 2 text messages. It's amazing because we talk about this every show. Tell people the difference between a will and a trust.
Okay. So a will, last will and testament, is a document you create to name the person who's going to settle your estate after you pass. And it indicates often how you want things distributed. Okay. A will is a public document. It's supposed to be, Florida statute said it's supposed to, if you know there's a will and you have it, you're supposed to file the original with the appropriate county within 10 days of knowing of the person's death. They don't enforce that because it's pretty unreasonable. I mean, you're in the midst of grief, right? So they don't enforce that. But there is a statute that says it, and it's totally public. So if you've got somebody who's died and their will has been deposited, it's called, it's on public record. Somebody can find it and they can find that you have all these assets or you've named so-and-so the executor or whatever. A trust can protect your assets from probate, meaning, and it's private. So the first person I heard of, and this was, I think, before I became an attorney, Bing Crosby had a trust. Who knows how much he was worth when he passed, but nobody ever knew because he had put all of his assets into a trust. So the trust is designed, in my opinion, and we've talked about this before, if you've got young children. Right now, I've got somebody, he's 80, his son is 50. His 50-year-old son has a 6-year-old son, which I think is so cool. Okay. So he might consider a trust to protect against his son dying before him, and then the money would go to the grandson. Young children, you want to do it because most people do not want children to inherit any kind of substantial money, however you define that, at the age of 18, and they cannot inherit money before they're 18. So I'm looking at the questions. So the trust is where you put your assets into a trust, and then whoever you've appointed as the successor trustee is the one who distributes it. So you and Sophia have a $300,000 IRA together, or you have one, and the beneficiary becomes the trust because you're willing for two of your beneficiaries to get their share right away, but your third beneficiary, you don't want to get it until they're 40. You need somebody to manage the money, invest the money, be responsible for the money. So that would be a reason for a trust. I've got one client now, he's got about $1 million in assets. He's got everything beneficiary designated. He might want a trust in anticipation of grandchildren. Who knows? But a will, if it's straightforward, you don't need a trust. So one of the questions here, wills are part of...
Yeah.
Okay, can someone contest a will, and how would that work? Wait a second, but the other one, would a trust or will be better? You need both. You need both. The will is the catch-all. I've got, there are Camp Lejeune cases. People have to have wills, hopefully have wills, and appoint people to represent the estate whenever the Camp Lejeune cases are. If you have a medical malpractice or a personal injury case, a will is there because you've created the instrument by which a settlement would be taken. Otherwise, the court's going to have to appoint somebody. You need both. Somebody can contest the will. How would that work? Somebody contests the will. They say there's, Uncle Joe's been unduly influenced by his niece, Deb, to leave everything to her, and you've been cut out. You can contest it. I don't do it. I recommend actually against it. It's hard to prove that somebody's been influenced. It's very expensive, and it's all up front, and it's all out of your pocket. If you win a will contest, that's one. If you lose, it's money you've spent, for no reason, in my opinion. But you would talk to an attorney. What if more than one will comes up after a person's departed? That's great. The most current will rules.
Does that happen?
Yeah, actually, I've got a case right now where we found a one that was only about 6 months newer, but it's newer. And once I discovered it, I have no choice but to tell the probate court it's probate. So every wills, powers of attorney, healthcare, they should all say that they revoke all prior documents. Okay, that's pretty standard. But if two wills show up, it's the more current one that rules. And right now I've got a client, his dad had a will from a long time ago where he named his 3 children beneficiaries of half his estate and his wife's decedents, his wife's heirs, beneficiary of her half of the estate if she predeceased him. If he had not done a new will, like 4 days before he passed, unfortunately, that would be the will that stood. And it wouldn't matter that his family felt that her family had already gotten everything that they deserved. They would have had to be included. So the most current will. And does a will prevent probate? No, a will does not prevent probate because there are lots of other conversations about how you prevent probate. If you have a house and you haven't done something with it, in Florida, there are a couple of things you can put in a trust. You can do a type of deed that will have it belong to somebody after you pass. If you haven't done something like that and you have a home, the fact that your will says it belongs to my son, Steve, or Stephen, my son, Stephen, and we've disinherited his brother, that he has to go to court to prove he has to go to court. Just because the will says it does not mean the court will do it without a document that's naming Steve as the beneficiary. So you want to find an attorney, you want to find somebody you trust, interview more than one, find somebody close to your home. I mean, I can operate in the whole state of Florida. Somebody asked me recently, can I help her family in Miami? I said, yes, but really, I will find her somebody who will do that. I live 5 hours from Miami. Last one, we might have time. What if you have a will in different states or countries? What trumps what in that case? I don't know. I can't answer the question about countries. I have no idea. I do know that if you own property in Florida and you own property in another country, you need a will in that other country. So I don't know that a will from another country would have any validity in Florida. If you have a will from a different state, it will be valid in Florida if it was executed according to what Florida needs. So here's the last thing, and we're running out of time. If you have a will from a different state and you have named as your executor or personal representative or whatever they call them, you have named somebody who is not a blood relative, okay, then, and you move to Florida, it will not be valid. In Florida, it has to be a blood relative or live in Florida. So if you've named somebody who's not a blood relative from another state and they live in Florida, it'll serve you when you come to Florida. In Florida, it has to be blood. So Steve can name Sophia as his personal representative. That's fine because they live in Florida. If Sophia was his best friend or his sister and she moved out of Florida, she can no longer serve.
Debbie,
His
tell
sister,
people how they
as
can.
his sister, she could serve. But if it was his best friend and she moved out of Florida, Sophia can no longer be his personal representative in the state of Florida. So that's a question to talk to an attorney about if you're in Florida and you have a will from another state.
Tell people how they can reach you.
So I can be reached in Tampa at 813-586-1332, 813-586-1332. I return all my calls by the end of the next business day. My email address is debbaker at London Baker Law, London like the city, Deb Baker at London Baker Law. And the website is londonbakerlaw.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who calls. And do me a favor, if you call, tell me you called because you heard me on Steve's show, because he and I have no idea if anybody's calling
And
me
now
from
we're
hearing
getting
the
all
shows.
these people writing questions in. So we love your questions. We thank you. Deb's with us the last Monday of every month. She'll be back in with us next month. And you can also go back and watch her shows, listen to her shows on iHeart and on Spotify. Deb, I love you. You know that.
Thanks,
I'll see you
Steve.
next month.
All right, see ya. Bye. Bye, Rebel.
Hey, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we've got more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.